We are continuing in our trainings on abiding practices, specifically prayer. This is the third training, and it's going to focus on lament. So what is a lament? Let's just jump right in. A lament is a prayer of grief or sorrow or distress that's expressed toward God. It's a way of acknowledging our pain. It's a way to express our emotions and to seek comfort and hope from God. The Western church has kind of lost this aspect of prayer, so we want to make sure that we cover that, but in a way that's really approachable. So it's a lament is a gateway to a renewed focus on God's faithfulness, even in the midst of suffering. So our circumstances may or may not change. So this is a way to kind of pour out our hearts to God with a biblical model. So honestly, it's something I love about Christianity, that Christianity can handle real life and all its difficulties. So let's turn to an example. The example we want to use this time is going to be found in the book, the minor prophet Habakkuk. And I'm just going to turn there and maybe read a little bit there and just see that this book is a powerhouse of good news for uncertain and dark times. So Habakkuk, just a little background, is a confused prophet. He's distressed by all the injustice and the wickedness that's around him. The Babylonians are being built up. They're going to take over the people of Israel very soon. And so he's just confused. He complains. He cries out to the Lord. We get to hear him, and we get to then hear God's response. So the book opens with this complaint. Let me just read that from chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or I cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the most basic structure, and there are different structures out there that scholars have brought together from the Bible, but the most basic one has 4 parts to it. Number 1, turn. Number 2, complain. Number 3, ask. And number 4 is trust. Now we're going to run through all 4 of those and see where they show up in the book of Habakkuk. So let's see how it works. First, turn. Turn away from your circumstances. Turn away from worldly answers and turn to God, to look at God. So we're taking our focus from here and we're turning it to God. That's what Habakkuk is doing. To take, biblically speaking, to take our eyes from the hills and the danger and to put them on God. He does this in verse 2. And then quickly in verse 3, he pivots where we find his first complaint. All right. He basically says, why are you silent? Where are you, God? Why aren't you doing anything? What do you even see what's going on? Do you care? And this is probably full of tears and full of grief and probably some fear. To cry out is human. To lament is distinctly Christian. To lament is to believe in a sovereign God. It's what will we do with our grief and our pain, our sorrow, our fear, our anxiety? Do we keep it bottled up? Do we suppress it? Do we stuff it down? Do we pretend it's okay? Do we minimize? Do we deny it? Those don't work long term. And neither is it the biblical model we find here in Habakkuk. Habakkuk learns that God is using the Babylonians to judge Israel, that God is using a ruthless people to discipline and purify God's people. This is not what Habakkuk had in mind when he was praying for justice. That's why God says in verse 5, look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. So we don't always know what the Lord is doing. We don't always understand it. And even if he were to tell us, like he says here, we might not believe it. Lament recognizes that and deals with that. We might respond kind of like Habakkuk did in chapter 2, verse 13. He says, why are you, let me find it here, why are you who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong? Why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? This is complaint number 2. Why aren't you doing anything? Number 1 is, don't you see this? What's going on? And why aren't you doing anything? Yes, your people aren't obeying you, God. But surely you can't use an ungodly, wicked people to judge a godly people, can you? So he doesn't agree with how God is running the world. He might even think he would do a better job. This is where the complaint is. I mean, have you ever thought like that? But we don't end our prayers with complaints. That's just where we're honest. We tell God what's really going on in our hearts. We pour our hearts out, but that's not the end. That's not the end of the prayer. Then he asks, which is number 3, at the end of both complaints, is this going to continue? Is this social devastation going to continue? Will our uncertainty and our fear continue? When are you going to step in? Are you sure this is the best answer? He asks boldly, and then we see chapter 2, verse 1. He takes his stand. He just waits. And verse 2 of chapter 2 says, and the Lord answered me. God in his grace answers us, even when he doesn't have to. Sometimes it's on our timeline. Most of the time not. Verse 3 says, if it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. God will accomplish all his will. He is sovereign. He's not in heaven wringing his hands, worried about how the world's going to work out. That's not it at all, I assure you. And it's not like that for Habakkuk's time, and neither is it like that for our time. God is just as in control and capable of running the world now as he was then. And so in verse 4, he says, the just shall live by faith. And in chapter 2, verse 14, for the world will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of God as the waters cover the sea. And again in verse 20, but the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. It's kind of like when God said to Job, where were you when I made the world? This is bigger than you know, Habakkuk. So am I. So don't forget who I am and what I've done. And so finally we move from turn to complain, to ask, and finally to trust, the fourth part. Trusting God and his purposes even when it doesn't make sense. And this is what we see Habakkuk do. After God answers Habakkuk in chapter 2, we see a different Habakkuk emerge. One that's dropped his complaining, his better ideas, and better sense of truth and justice than God. And he responds in surrender by recalling the mighty acts of God in the past and what he is reminded of what God can do and what God will do, that God is faithful to his name. In chapter 3, verse 16, we find a healthy tension that prepares us for difficulty. Verse 16 says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. He's going to wait for justice. And so here's what I love about lament. It holds the tension of that unsettled feeling of we don't understand what's going to happen, or grief or sorrow. And it marries it and couples it to waiting and trusting in the Lord at the same time. The tension's not relieved, but that's real life. This is what living in the shadow of the Almighty looks like. Let's finish out this life-changing response of Habakkuk in chapter 3, verse 17 through 19. He says this, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herds in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God the Lord is my strength, and he makes my feet like the deer's, and he makes me tread on high places. This is him entering into the last phase of the lament, trust. Listen to that beautiful submission of trusting God with his life no matter what comes. Habakkuk has met God, and he's beheld him in his sanctuary, and he trusts him regardless. And even though his circumstances are still severe and they have not changed, and it's a dreadful time to be alive, look at the worship that's starting to develop during his waiting. And this is the faith that we need. This is the faith that we can have. This is what lamenting is preparing us for. It's an offensive weapon that acts as a bridge from dire circumstances of pain and fear to praise and to worship and trust of the Lord who's in his holy temple. So the heart of Habakkuk here displays the resolution of one whose eyes have now been opened to where they should have been opened from the beginning. He will now, because of his suffering and trials, through lament, delight and worship more deeply than he ever has in God before. And that's our prayer for you. And so let's move maybe from talking about this into a practice, and one of our abiding practices, and actually do this. A good one to do and to start with maybe is it's short, Psalm 13. How long, O Lord? So why don't you take a few minutes as a group and break down Psalm 13 into the 4 parts of turn, complain, ask, and trust. So remember, turn is to kind of admit your sadness, to notice and name where you are, to not deny or ignore or push down or suppress, but to admit the sadness, to the distress and the grief. And then we move to number 2, complain. It's like, tell the truth, pour out your heart, say what you really feel, but don't stay there. Move to number 3, where you ask God, make it right, or this is what I think should happen. And the most important step is to move to phase 4, which is trust. To trust God that He is good, that He will do what needs to be done, that He will right the wrongs, and that He is faithful. And then we sit. And maybe you start, and maybe with your group, you take different people pick out different parts, or you can all just take a few minutes to all do that and compare notes. And then maybe just kind of flesh that out a little bit. Maybe consider writing a psalm of lament of your own. What would that look like for you to turn and complain and ask and then trust in the specific circumstances that you find yourself in right now? Now let's practice this. Turn to Psalm 13. Get out your journal, or if you do this in your group, and we'll break that psalm down into these 4 parts of turn, where you admit your sadness, you kind of turn from your circumstances and turn to God, and then you complain, you tell the truth, you pour out your heart. Where is that in Psalm 13? Where do you see David doing that? And then number 3, you see him ask. All right, what is he asking God to do? Where is he asking God to make right? And then finally, where do you see him trust? And then maybe write those down in your journal, and then share that with one another, or maybe write your own lament and have the 4 components of turn, complain, ask, and trust, and write that in your journal, and then share it with someone.